Welcome participants to this MOOC course on climate change vulnerability and adaptation. I am Shahab Fazal, faculty in the Department of Geography at Aligarh Muslim University. In our previous discussion, I explained the causes of climate change, natural and human. And also I tried to highlight their interactions, where the role of atmosphere, the greenhouse gas effect, I tried to explain in detail. And now I am sure that you have a fair idea of the causes of this phenomena of climate change. So in this session, I intend to highlight the evidences of climate change. What are the evidences for climate changes which we are observing and discussing? Among the various evidences for climate change, there is unequivocal evidence that Earth is warming at an unprecedented rate and human activity is the principal cause of it. Principal cause of this Earth warming, which we are calling it as global warming. Earth's climate has changed throughout the history. I had tried to highlight this in my previous discussion. Just in the last 8 lakh years, this geological history of the Earth, there have been 8 cycles of ice ages along with the warmer periods. With the end of last ice age about 11,700 years ago, this was the period, the beginning of the modern climate area. And in this period of 11,700 years, it can also be called as era of human civilization. The human being, they came into existence in this particular era of ice age, last ice age. Most of these climate changes were attributed to very small variations in, say, Earth orbits that change the amount of solar energy our planet receives, which have resulted into variations in global warming in the past. In this graph, I am trying to highlight the Earth orbiting satellites and new technologies have helped scientists see the big picture, collecting many different types of information about our planet and also about the climate over the world. These data collected over many years reveal the signs and patterns of changing climate. This graph, based on the comparison of atmospheric samples contained in ice cores and more recent direct measurements, all of them, they provide evidences that atmospheric carbon dioxide has increased since the Industrial Revolution. The carbon dioxide level were never in Earth history was above 300 particle per million. And as I have mentioned earlier also in my previous discussion, presently it is about 423 ppm. So the current warming trend is different because it is clearly the result of human activities, which started, this pronounced human activities started from Industrial Revolution in mid 18th century and is proceeding at a rate not seen over many recent millennia. The human population has increased substantially. This commercial nature of human activity, where we are trying to raise our output, all of them, they are so pronounced over the Earth's surface. So the emission levels are higher. There is no doubt about it. It is undeniable that human activities have produced the atmospheric gases that have trapped more the sun's energy in the Earth system. The extra energy has warmed the oceans, the atmosphere, the land, and resulted into rapid changes in the atmosphere, the cryosphere, the biosphere. All of them, they are all interlinked and they are influencing this larger phenomena of climate change. The evidence of rapid climate change is compelling. The planet's average surface temperature has risen by more than 1 degree Celsius during the last 100 years only. And as I am saying again and again that this change is driven largely by increased emissions of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that too by human activities. Accelerated warming has occurred in the past 40 years more rapidly. I have tried to explain you in my previous discussion that how in the last 40 years there has been 40% increase in the emission of greenhouse gases. The evidence is that 7 most recent years being the warmest in the modern day history of Earth in last 200 years. These warmer years were 2016, 2020 and 2022. They are warmest year on record. Ice cores drawn from Greenland, Antarctica and tropical mountain glaciers, they also indicate that Earth's climate responds to changes in greenhouse gas levels. Even the ancient evidence can also be found in tree rings, ocean sediments, coral reefs and layers of sedimentary rocks. This past or paleoclimate evidences reveals that current warming is occurring roughly around 10 times faster than the average rate of warming after this ice age which I have mentioned. Carbon dioxide from human activities has increased almost by 250 times faster than it did from natural sources after the last ice age. The evidences are very clearly pointing towards the increased intense human activities and the resultant emissions. Another evidence is that the ocean is also getting warmer. I have tried to explain you earlier also that the ocean absorb much of the heat from the atmosphere. And interestingly, the scientists suggest that the top 100 meters, somewhere around 325 feet of oceans, showing warming by almost 0.7 degrees Fahrenheit, about 0.33 degrees Celsius. In the last 40 years, 45 years, the Earth stores 90% of the extra energy in these oceans. Now you all know that these oceans occupy about 70% of the Earth's surface. So it's substantial. It's very important and critical also. The experts suggest that 90% of global warming is occurring in the ocean only because the size of water bodies over the Earth's surface. It is causing the water's internal heat to increase. So heat stored in the ocean causes its water to expand. That's a very common understanding and scientific fact, which is also contributing to the global sea level rise. Now you see how every phenomena is interlinked to many others, and the end result is that we are observing the phenomena of climate change. So most of the added energy is stored at the surface at a depth of somewhere around 700 meters. The last 10 years were the ocean's warmest decade since at least the Industrial Revolution. In the last 200 years, the last 10 years the oceans are warmest. The year 2023 was the ocean's warmest recorded year. So during the recent time, the ocean is getting warmer and warmer. That's what I can say. Now this ocean heat is critical because 70% of the earth's surface is covered by ocean waters. And the global ocean has a very high heat capacity. It absorbed somewhere around 90% of the warming that has occurred in the recent decades due to increasing greenhouse gases. And importantly, the top few meters of the ocean store as much heat as the Earth's entire atmosphere is retaining. So the effect of ocean warming include sea level rise due to thermal expansion, but it has much larger impact in the form of coral bleaching, accelerated melting of Earth's major ice sheets, intensified hurricanes, and also changes in the ocean's biochemistry in the form of the ocean water is getting more and more acidic, and it has its implication on the sea resource. So again, I would say that the phenomena is enormous and it is very interrelated. So one area we are observing some changes, but its implications are far reaching in all the other phenomena also. And that is why we say that climate change is complex and dynamic. Another evidence is that the ice sheets are shrinking. As the global temperature increases, the melting of massive ice sheets that blanket the North and South Pole, the Antarctica and Greenland, the melting is happening at a very accelerated rate. Can you believe Earth is losing around 1 trillion tons of ice each year, which is not being replenished? The Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets have decreased in mass. The data from NASA Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment shows that Greenland has lost an average 280 billion tons of ice per year since 1993. So in the last 30 years, 280 billion tons of ice have disappeared from Greenland. It's quite massive. Not only Greenland, the southern pole, the Antarctica, it lost about 150 billion tons every year. These are massive figures. This is important because the ice sheets of Greenland and Antarctica store about 2/3 of the fresh water on Earth. That's another dimension to this argument. Now when they are losing ice due to the ongoing warming, global warming of Earth's surface and ocean, the ice sheets, the fresh water, it is being dissolved into the ocean salty water. So we are losing also the fresh water storage over the Earth's surface. That's another dimension. The Arctic Sea is also declining. Both the areal expanse and extent and also the thickness of Arctic Sea. It has declined rapidly over the last few decades. The last 40 years, the scientists suggest that annual Arctic Sea ice measurements has come down by 12.6%. Each decade, a pace of decline that's unmatched by any point of time in the last 200 years. So the Arctic Sea, which is at higher latitude, always sub-zero or near sub-zero temperature, the ice should not melt. But the global warming is resulting into these colder areas, the polar areas, where all around the year the temperature is very low. The ice does exist there. But due to the global warming, due to the ocean warming, these ice are melting and melting in great magnitude. That's also very important evidence for global warming and climate change. More close to India, these are the pictures of two sides of Himalayas, the northern and southern sides of Himalayas. And the same areas, you see, the pictures have been taken some 60 years back, and now the glaciers have disappeared. The glaciers are retreating almost everywhere around the world, including the Alps, Himalayas, Andes, Rockies and Alaska, etc. The researchers suggest that we have lost almost 270 billion tons of ice a year during the first 2 decades of the 21st century. So, in the last 20 years, 270 billion tons of ice has disappeared from these mountains, mountain peaks which are covered with ice. Now, no longer they are covered. They all have disappeared. The worldwide inventory of glaciers contains about 2,17,000 ice streams. These glaciers on the slopes of mountains. Some of them they are smaller, say hundreds of square meter, but some are quite big as European countries. Now all the glaciers of the earth, they are retreating, they are thinning also in their thickness, pointing towards the climate change. Either through stronger melting in warmer air or because the patterns of snowfall that feed these glaciers have shifted and changed. Glacier melting accounts for a quarter of Earth's ice loss. That's again substantial. And the changes taking place are disrupting the water supplies, which even India is observing. The loss of ice on the glaciers of hill mountains, mountains like Everest, Himalayan mountains. So, the large population in the northern plain, they are short of water in the perennial rivers. We are consuming more water and the water supply from these glaciers are being reduced because the thinning of the glaciers on these Himalayan mountains and elsewhere also. Now this problem is aggravated due to climate change, when also the another dimension to it is that especially in the years of drought, when the meltwater becomes a critical source. So when the volume of water reduced in the perennial rivers, this problem is aggravated. Although the rate of glacier melting has increased, the pace has been overshadowed by the accelerating ice losses also at Antarctica and Greenland, which I have explained you. So you see, everywhere glacier melting is happening and it is a cause of worry. If I can continue with this discussion with another example, the satellite observations reveal that the amount of spring snow cover in the northern hemisphere at higher latitude has also decreased very rapidly in the last 3-4 decades, in last 30-40 years. The snow is melting at a very rapid rate. This is also an alarming evidence of climate change. Snow cover plays a key role in Earth's surface because of its relationship with terrestrial climate system. As I have said that all of them, they are interlinked with each other. It is a hydrological variable very sensitive to climate change. The loss of snow cover in the northern hemisphere at higher latitude. In this context, mountain areas have very relevant role because of the known amplification effect of climate change with cascading effects on downstream areas. It is estimated that approximately 15% of the total seasonal snow area above 40° north in alpine region of North America and also in Europe, about 13% of the Eurasian region, the snow cover is decreasing. And the experts found that the snow presence in the Arctic and southern latitude of in northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, it is generally decreasing, and they are decreasing at a very alarming rate. So everywhere over the earth's surface, the snow cover is decreasing. And when the snow cover is decreasing, another evidence which is very prominent, that is the sea level rise. This is another climate change evidence. The global sea level rose by about 8 inch, 20 centimeters in last 20 years. The rate in which only in the last 2 decades, it is nearly double that of the last century. That means the rate of sea level rise in the recent time has even accelerated. It is also, the sea level rise is also a symptom of climate change. There is no doubt about it. Sea level can rise by 2 different mechanisms. I have explained, but I will touch upon it again. With respect to climate change, there are 2 different mechanisms. First is, as the ocean warms, due to increasing global temperature, sea water expands, taking up more space in the ocean. This causes the rise in water level. But the second mechanism which I was pointing in my previous slide, that the melting of ice cover land, the melting of ice over the land as well as over the mountains. When they melt, they add water into the ocean, and we have seen as to a very alarming rate of melting of glaciers we have observed. Similarly, the rate of sea level rise in the last 2-3 decades were far more than what we observed earlier. And this rise in sea level have wide reaching implication, not just on the physical environment, but also the economic, social and cultural fabric of vulnerable nations across the world, the coastal locations. I mentioned this in my previous discussion also, that how the sea level rise is a great concern to the coastal locations, where the water level at some point of the time in the year, during rainy season, monsoon seasons in India, or when some cyclone etc. they occur, they hit the coastal areas, the water do come, sea water do come, penetrate more the land area. Now it's large scale destruction. The humans have built lot of infrastructure. They all get destroyed. So sea level rise is not only the level of rise in the ocean, but their impact on the coastal locations, they are also part of this climate change phenomena. So again I would say it's very complex, but they are all interrelated. The climate change also result into increasing frequency of extreme weather events. For example, the record of high temperature days and nights over the earth's surface, they are increasing. The cold days, they are also increasing. At some portion, some areas of the earth. So the erratic behavior of weather elements. So these extreme events, they result into human losses, the infrastructure losses. These erratic behavior of weather elements result into becoming more and more expensive for human being. The Earth's climate change is impacting extreme weather across the planet. We are observing heat waves in Europe. We have found that there is drenching rains in desert area, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, severe floods in Europe and among Asian countries. And in these areas also droughts are also very frequent. So in one instance, the same area will observe floods in some part. You can take the example of India, and also droughts are happening. There is extreme wildfires, widespread flooding during hurricanes. All these events, they are more frequent and intense, and they are all very expensive. In the last 20 years, world has recorded around 7,400 major natural disasters. Can you believe some 1.23 billion people, 1.23 million people have lost their life due to all these natural disasters. And as I am saying that it is becoming more and more expensive, some $300 trillion of global economic losses have incurred due to this erratic behavior of climate. So I would say that climate change is real, and erratic behavior of weather elements are the clear evidence to it. I have touched this point, but I will go again try to explain that one very important evidence is that the ocean water is becoming more and more acidic in nature. The ocean acidification is increasing. I would say that ocean acidification is climate change's evil twin. You all might be now understood that the carbon dioxide emission is happening in the atmosphere. The concentration of carbon dioxide is increasing in the atmosphere. So this overload of carbon dioxide is resulting into adding up into the ocean water, literally causing a change, threatening the fragile, finite marine life, and in turn it has also its bearing on food security, livelihood, and local to global economies. The image is depicting how increase in ocean acidification is happening with higher carbon dioxide emission, resulting into the detrimental impact on climate life. So these oceans, they are carbon sinks. So when the carbon dioxide concentration is greater in the atmosphere, they are bound to absorb by the ocean waters. These oceans, they act like a sponge. Oceans are absorbing increasing amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Over the past 200 years, the world sea have absorbed, can you believe, 150 billion metric tons of carbon which have been emitted by the human activities. So the oceans have absorbed between 20 to 30% of the total anthropogenic carbon dioxide emission, somewhere around 7 to 10 billion metric tons every year. So water added with carbon dioxide, it becomes carbonic acid, and This is how the ocean water is becoming more and more acidic. Currently, worldwide 15, or rather I would say somewhere around 10 kg per person a week within 7 days, they are added to the ocean waters. Per person, 8 billion people over the earth. It is enough to fill a coal train long enough to encircle the equator 13 times every year. That amount of carbon is being added to the ocean water, resulting into the ocean water getting more and more acidic. It has far-reaching implications. So to conclude, I can say that the evidences are pointing definite threat to the humanity due to the climate change. We may say that in the case of climate change, scientists have found a range of possible future changes in temperature, precipitation and other important variables, which will depend largely on how quickly we reduce the emissions. But there is another dimension, you all now familiar with it, that these gases have large presence, large life cycle in the atmosphere. The uncertainty does not undermine that the climate change is real and we are responsible, the human being, they are responsible for that. So sooner we change ourselves, the better is for our future generation. So again I would conclude by saying that we must act sensibly. Thank you. Happy learning.